Hello, guys. Thank you for joining me.
Hello.
Hello. Can we do a mic check?
Hello.
Excellent. Melita, would you mind just introducing yourself first of all?
Yeah, sure. My name is Dr. Melita Moore. I am from the U.S. I'm a professional sports medicine and esports medicine physician in the U.S. I've taken care of our professional NBA 2K team, and I am a board member of the Global Esports Federation, the chair of our Health and Wellness Commission, and the vice president of Pan Am Esports Development Federation, all for the Global Esports Federation. So super excited to be here.
Follow that, Alex.
Yeah, I'm not a doctor, so 1-0 Melita. No, my name's Alex. I'm the head of performance for Williams Resolve currently. I'm also, as of a couple of days ago, announced as a performance advisor for British Esports, which is very exciting.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. So yeah, my work is with our various different esports teams at Williams Resolve. Going to be helping out through the Commonwealth, through the Performance Campus, and a couple other bits for British Esports as well.
Good stuff. So this obviously is wellness and high performance. Now, when we had a little chat about inviting you to the panel, you both made it very clear that you wanted high performance to be part of the title.
Yeah.
Alex, just tell me a little bit why you wanted that specification of the title itself, because I could have just called it wellness and performance, but apparently that was not good enough.
So I've become a bit of a stickler for words. I'm a bit of a semantic freak with this sort of stuff. There are some words that I don't particularly like, simply because they're not very prescriptive. So there are buzzwords that I'm not a big fan of, and performance tends to be really ambiguous. Another one being sort of well-being. I tend to find that as a bit of a difficult word to grasp and make good sense of. So I think high performance was really important for me based on the work that I do in Williams Resolve as well.
Cool. So Melita, tell us the players that you've worked with in the past, how important has your job been in their performance and their results?
I think it's been very important. My professional esports team that I no longer take care of, but while I did, they won 2 championships back-to-back. And this is the first team, at least in the NBA 2K League, that had a team physician. And so I really took what I do for my professional NBA players, WNBA players, NFL players, and just transitioned that over to gaming and esports. But I did this back in 2019, and there really wasn't, to my knowledge, any team physician for a professional esports organization. And so I think that when we are treating these gamers like athletes, because they are athletes, and I know the term athlete is a little, controversial depending on who you're speaking to, but I think with the level of high performance that gamers actually do, especially at the professional level, they're athletes, and so they should have the same resources. So I think it contributed to our team winning and building a very large and solid medical team around them.
So you won based, you think, on your job, right?
I mean, not to say it was me, but it's always a team effort, right?
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
of course. So when you're doing this kind of training and these best practices with athletes or your e-athletes or however you want to call them, what do you think transitions the most between practices that you've seen before in terms of professional sport or other professional athletes? Like, what do you think actually pulls across the easiest, and what comes across hardest? Is it the mental side, or is it the physical or lack of physical side?
I think it's probably more the physical side. It's very interesting in esports. Previously, we didn't have this path to pro. We are now, British Esports Association is doing an excellent job in helping to create the next gamers of tomorrow. But unlike your, football here or basketball, usually you're training from a young age up until you get to this level of sport. And so the gamers, the athletes, they just didn't know what they didn't know. They didn't know that vision health was important. They didn't understand why you needed to exercise to improve your performance or why sleep was so important. And so I think it's really a lot about education. And once they are like, oh, wow, I can eat better to have a better performance, now I understand that, and now they can then do that. Our team, we had like 2 collegiate athletes. And so our team, they actually play basketball together every week. But we had them working out with like our exercise physiologist every week, making sure they were getting in this physical activity. I think that was like, why are we doing this? But I think it made a big difference, not only just from a performance perspective, but also from a team cohesion perspective.
Yeah, I think just to touch on that, I think it can be really difficult the buy-in is one of the most important things for the players, right? So making sure that when we're talking about health, fitness, well-being, diet, sleep, nutrition, all of these sorts of things, making sure that players understand from an educational standpoint, but they have to be bought into the idea, I've found. And a lot of it comes down to understanding the differences, the nuance between traditional sports and esports. So for me, one of the big things was taking all of the knowledge and understanding that I've had from traditional sports over the last 12 odd years, and helping apply that to esports by having it through the guise of things like cognitive function. So eating well and sleeping well is going to help your brain activity. By helping all of the differences for cognitive function, that's going to impact your in-game performance.
Agreed.
Do you feel that, particularly with esports players, they are, well, they've grown up with this kind of like, right, gaming is it's my pastime, it's my hobby, not my career, right? So they've come into it, so it's the thing they do in their leisure time. So it's been associated very much with spending your free time rather than a regimented, this is what I'm doing because this is my job, this is my career, this is my profession. Yeah. Is it harder to, and especially because it's esports and gaming, this is something that most would associate with late nights, perhaps an alcoholic beverage or something like this. Is it difficult to train esports athletes, particularly in things like time management, sleep management? Sure. Do you find that that's harder than teaching them how to eat properly or something else to that effect?
Do you know what? I was talking to some of the guys from Warwick Uni before, and I sort of said, I wish I could give really concrete answers in this. The issue with that is it's really hard to give a concrete answer on something like that, from my experience at least, because everyone's so different. Some people might have a real issue with sleep, and that's the thing that they want to really tackle. Others might have absolutely no understanding of the impact of nutrition, and that's something they need to tackle. So my experience is it's really different for each individual. My dissertation at uni was on the perceived impacts on esports performance from esports athletes, and the biggest one was sleep. So that's, hopefully that reads into something.
Bit of an obstacle there. Would you, anything to add to that, Melita?
No, I agreed, and kind of going back to, like Global Esports Federation, when we talk about wellness of a gamer, we always talk about cognitive wellness. So this whole brain, eye, body connection, and people don't understand that vision is such a large part of what we're talking about from a wellness perspective. But I think it all comes, sleep affects every single thing that you're doing with your gaming, how you're actually digesting the food that you eat, how you're performing, with blue light, if you're staying up longer. So I'm not surprised that sleep was really kind of pulled out there, because people don't understand you need sleep for recovery. I mean, medical people or non-athletes, they'll maybe not understand like the importance of sleep in everything that we do from a stress perspective, obesity perspective. So I'm glad that that's actually what it showed.
Yeah, I think as well it tends to be like a bit of a domino effect. And I've found that when sleep is one of the heaviest dominoes. So if we can suss sleep, all of a sudden exercise tends to come alongside it. And now that we're exercising, I need to put a bit more impetus on my diet. So now we can work on the diet. So it tends to go thusly.
That's really interesting. I had no idea. Well, I mean, you could kind of make an educated guess, but it's good to know that that kind of sets things in motion and starts falling into place. One of the questions I wanted to ask was, particularly Melita, because you've obviously worked with a professional team in the past and had results to look at. I know, Alex, you're working with teams now, but you haven't got those results yet. So how fast do you see results when you start training an athlete in things like their vision, their sleep, their nutrition? How tangible are those results in terms of taking it onto the field of battle?
Yeah, I think that really depends on the type of data that you're collecting, what kind of analytics that you're using. So if we're just saying, we did a quality of life study at the medical hospital that I worked at before for our esports athletes from the beginning of the season to the end of the season, and their quality of life changed significantly. Did we really see that translate into games won? I'm not for sure, but if you're talking about aim labs, or if you're talking about doing something logistical or tactical or technical, then of course we're going to be able to see those, especially if we're doing some vision training in between that. If we're doing, some exercise performance, there's some studies that show that even when you exercise, you improve your performance from that, or even a 6-minute walk, which sounds crazy, but a 6-minute walk actually can then improve your performance. So those kind of things we can kind of see real time, but I think taking over the course of a season, I think that depends on the data and the analytics that you're tracking.
I think there's also a lot of nuance to it, right? When it comes to in-game metrics, it's really hard to sort of collect data from it, because there could be so many different things. You think about League of Legends, maybe the enemy jungler ganked top more times this game than they did the previous game. So how do we measure that? So when it comes to the sort of intangibles of exercise, diet, and sleep, well, when relating it to in-game performance, I think it's even more nuanced based on what's happening in the game. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer. I appreciate that you're the experts, and I'm trying to draw the information. Maybe that one was a bit of too difficult. So, in terms of how kind of responsive students in an educational setting would find, taking on lessons from their teachers, their staff, at their faculty, teaching them about nutrition, about physical well-being, about mental well-being. How well would that translate, do you think, to students these days, as general population goes, not professional athletes?
I think it's going to translate well, and maybe some of these students are going to go on to be coaches or general managers or team owners or tournament organizers. When you understand, I think, the importance of how health relates to these athletes and how it impacts their performance and their travel schedule, all these things you take into account. So I think if you're doing a various role as a student and maybe going into the esports arena, not necessarily as a physician or, a physio, but I think knowing that, hey, even if we're in marketing, maybe we need to talk about a recovery product that we can help to market and sponsor so that our players can have that. So I think it's very important that we all are learning about the importance of wellness for gamers.
Yeah, I think at Resolve, one of the things that I'm trying to do an awful lot is make sure that the sort of resources that are given to players are also given to staff and to the wider community as well. So performance, again, why it's there's a lot of nuance to the word performance, but there's organizational performance as well, right? So how do we make sure that the people that are doing amazing creative work like Jonas does, how do we make sure that they're performing at their best? So all of the things for diet, sleep, exercise, emotional regulation, all of these different things are given to everyone to make sure that everyone's performing. So for students, if in esports classes or esports clubs, things like that, you speak about the importance of health and well-being, what you will probably end up doing is impacting their life in a greater way than just esports performance.
So you touched there on emotional regulation, and I'm going to pick you up on that one.
Okay, yeah.
Right, particularly because lots of the people here in the audience are working with teenagers, and as we all know, teenagers are quite emotionally unstable. So what advice would you give them to, actually, how do you assess the level of emotion? How do you address what you need to do to either improve or regulate, as you said? And then finally, how do you actually implement that with a student who's potentially difficult?
Sure. So most of the work that I do for emotional regulation comes to sort of tactics at calming emotions, right? So I do a lot of work with breath work. I think that's a huge one that I've had a lot of success with vicariously through the players. A lot of sort of things that you wouldn't expect. So exercise is great for emotional regulation because if you have a lot of pent-up aggression, that can be sort of disseminated by exercise. We do a lot of work with meditation, mindfulness. Those are huge as well. Obviously, these things aren't going to be like a quick fix like that, and all of a sudden you're super calm and well-regulated. Whilst it does have that effect in the moment, it's obviously best done over long term. We also do a little bit of visualization and mental rehearsal. So normally when people talk about emotional regulation, it's anger and I'm frustrated or I'm tilted. But the reality is sort of performance anxiety is huge, and visualization, mental rehearsal can be really good for that as well.
Thank you. So Melita, the basketball players that you've worked with, did you have any kind of major struggles that needed to be sorted out straight away? Did they come to you with problems and say, right, I've got this mental health or this physical problem? Or did you have to kind of analyze them and tell them what their issues were?
No, definitely had to analyze them. There's one research study that showed that 13% of gamers will go to a doctor if they felt something, felt an injury or pain, felt a symptom before it became an injury. So classically, gamers don't want to go to the doctor. And so coming in as a team physician to someone who, number one, maybe has never played a team sport before, they bought in, But at the beginning, it's just kind of like, what is this? Like, you want to have a diffuser in our practice space? I'm like, yeah, mental alertness. And then maybe when it's time to go to, they're like, this is some hogwash. But they bought in. And I think they saw the effects over time. And so I think because this is a population that, again, it's not used to having performance, someone to help with performance coach or a medical team around them, they don't know what to ask or they don't know what to say. So, my whole thing is when you feel something, or if you see something different, before it becomes an actual issue or a true diagnosis, let's stop it at the beginning when it's just a symptom. We know that gamers really retire early, and a lot is, burnout, but a lot of times it's a lot of, hand use or overuse or other hand and wrist issues. It's like if we would have addressed that 2 years ago when you started to feel a little tingling and you knew that your finger was a little weak, we wouldn't be here. And I think that that's going to come along in the industry now that we do have healthcare professionals, with some of these top organizations, as well as with community roots organizations that are putting and shining a light on it. So I think that'll change.
Yeah, that's really good. So a point to take away, everybody. They're not going to come and talk to you if they've got a problem.
Sure
so,
won't.
keep your eyes peeled. You mentioned as well there, Melita, hand problems being one of the primary and causes of concern. What other injuries, other than your general mouse and hand and finger problems, are most commonly associated with being a professional gamer?
Yeah, everyone always says, "What are you a team doctor for? What do they have carpal tunnel?" And it really makes me angry because no, they don't. That's not really the main issue. So when I'm looking at how I look at wellness when addressing gamers, actually vision health is number one. And people just don't understand that the impact of looking at the screen that dries out your eyes, that then it triggers your blue light, so it impacts your sleep, or then it starts to create neck pain that then is going to create a chronic headache. So vision health for me has actually been number one. And then mental health is actually number two. And again, you're taking someone who is used to maybe playing at home by themselves, and now they're with the team, they're doing media interviews, they're playing in front of thousands of people, so that performance anxiety is really big. And so we use sports psychologists to kind of help, but it's very similar to what you're doing in that space. So vision health, mental health, of course, hand and wrist, low back, stress management, sleep management, exercise, nutrition. So that's kind of, and now actually hearing health, which wasn't really on my radar a lot. And we're working with the World Health Organization on the Safe Listening Initiative, really talking about the impact that we're seeing much younger people have sensory neural hearing loss, which is just like your traditional hearing loss. We're seeing that in younger generations. And so that's now something else that I'm really taking a look at with our gamers from an overall health perspective. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just wrist pain.
Yeah, I think this is my favorite thing to bring up, especially when there's lots of people, because I hear the most activity out of any point here. So one of the biggest things that I've seen cause injury is posture, and that's when people normally sort of shift up their chair like this to make sure they're not looking like a shrimp. Posture does that's one of the first things that I'll look at when it comes to addressing the way that people sort of sit. I know it sounds a little bizarre, but where's the monitor? Where's the keyboard? How's your chair set up? How often do you sort of shrimp forward like this? Because just the act of your shoulders coming forward can do an awful lot of bad for your neck, your upper back, your lower back. Even as far as like hamstrings can be affected by sort of back pain. So I think that's another one that I see an awful lot of.
Yeah, and I'm just going to casually slouch back down to where I was. No, my posture's terrible, to be honest. I'll try and sit up for the rest. I'll try and
Ergonomics,
do
it's
we'll do a
important.
social experiment. I'll sit up dead straight for the rest of the panel. Here we go. So yeah, I mean, I've struggled with posture. I've got back pain. I'm 32 now, and I've been playing games for as long as I can remember. And definitely, I wish I kind of had a bit more attention on that when I was younger. And I can imagine that it's not something that you can just fix. You have to kind of stop it earlier. Yeah. Otherwise, it compounds and gets worse. Yeah. Is there any kind of other major, particularly because your spine holds pretty much everything, supports your head, where your brain is kept, and all, what are the other sort of major worries for you guys as doctors and as practitioners?
The sedentary lifestyle is huge, but even for all of us that are not gamers, even during this pandemic, everyone's sitting much more. We're all in front of a computer screen. So, gamers are gaming 8 to 12 hours a day. as a corporate worker in America, they're on a computer screen 8 hours a day. And so we all can take something from the sedentary lifestyle, the proper ergonomics, the proper setup. And I know people talk about like blood clots, like in the legs. That's not very common. I haven't really seen that. So that's kind of, it's not a myth buster, but certainly being sedentary is something that we are really focusing on. So in between, and actually this comes down to the coach. So if the coach is bought into saying, hey, we're not going to practice as long, we're going to get off the computer early, maybe we have more strategy sessions, but making sure there's a scheduled break. And I know that's hard in a competition, that's not happening. But in practice, these are things that we can, definitely implement and do. So it's making sure you have a break to stand up. I usually tell people set a timer on your computer for 30 minutes. And every 30 minutes, just stand up.
A little bit
Stretch.
of Joe Wicks at home.
I think as well, I would completely agree. I think that's the biggest worry for me is people who sort of will sit and stay sitting in various positions, granted, but will stay sitting. The best piece of advice that I have seen work the most efficiently and effectively is the moment you finish a game, even if you're in a team environment, and I do this with all of our teams, headset off, get up, move, go and get some fresh air, go and get some water, do something. I'll see you in 2 minutes. Now, when you're doing a scrim set and it's 5 games long for League of Legends, or if it's Rocket League and it's an hour's scrim and there's 3 minutes in between, that sort of compounds way more than you would anticipate. All of a sudden, over the space of an hour, you've actually been up for 10 minutes, and that does make a big difference.
But I think, this whole notion, we keep going back to exercise, but, for younger kids under 18, they should be getting 60 minutes of moderate or vigorous exercise a day. And it doesn't necessarily have to be all at one time, but if you are working with children or you have children, they have to get in some activity. And as adults, we should be getting at least 30 minutes, at least 5 days a week. So that sedentary lifestyle for all of us, including gamers, of course, it has a big impact on a lot of our physical health. So we're going to stress exercise as a big piece of the conversation today.
I had a nightmare that I'm going to tell you about 2 weeks ago, where I'd worn my headset for so long that I had a bald patch right across the middle of my head, and I just was
That might not be a nightmare. You need to
it now,
change the
stop it
position.
now.
Change the position.
But no, it did lead me on to thinking about the lengths that people do wear headsets for, and particularly about the ears, because you're not giving them that air, you're not giving it, you're trapping bacteria in there. Have you guys come across any kind of particularly ear-related issues, or is that something that you don't see?
I hadn't really looked for it until I've been recently educated, and that's why I think in this industry of esports and gaming, it's really about education and awareness. We have this in traditional sport. We've known what to do, what the injuries are, for decades now. But with this new Safe Listening initiative, it really just opened my eyes to, wow, I never thought about having an audiologist come in at the beginning of a physical exam of the season and say, how are you hearing, and kind of tracking those metrics. So I haven't come across it because I haven't looked for it because I didn't know I should be.
Yeah, I guess anecdotally, and it's completely anecdotally, I'm always surprised if I've used a headset, for example, after a boot camp or working with a player, if I've used a headset that a player's using, quite the volume on it. It's completely anecdotal, but it seems to be the volume levels are significantly higher than what I would generally use. But it's not something I've looked too heavily into, honestly.
Yeah, I tend to find I'm shouting, and then I take my headset off, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I get told off every now and then for being too loud. We've talked a little bit about kind of the physical side of things. How much do you see improvement in players who have been doing these training methods in their mental state? Because obviously the two go hand in hand. So let's start with you, Melita. Tell me a bit about it.
I think our team had a significant improvement from the beginning of a season until the end, working with our sports psychologist. And it's so interesting coming on as the team physician. The year before, which was their very first season, the only medical provider they had was a sports psychologist. But I really feel like, even things about strategy and getting in the zone and teamwork, and also, focusing on the positive sides of gaming when it comes to social emotional benefits and social connectedness, but then the depression and anxiety. So it's not always bad things when you talk about the mental health, when you're talking about gaming. But I think our players became much more comfortable, number one, with each other, with their performance. and also with their performance anxiety. And we saw that in media interviews and, you know, how they're performing on the stage. I think these are things that people don't even think about and overlook. Like, if I'm used to being at home by myself and you put me on this stage in front of all of these people, maybe I'm going to clam up. And so I really think that that was probably one of the biggest changes that we were able to see from beginning to end of a season.
I think it's tough. I think a lot of the time, if you look at esports as an industry, I'm not entirely sure about sort of college and schools, so I'd be really interested to learn more about that. But certainly at the pro level, it's pretty inherently lonely. Unless you have a team house or a team office space, something along those lines. Our Rocket League roster from the last couple of splits, all three of them independently would play from home. They were in different homes. Two of them weren't going to school, one was. So the two that weren't going to school were playing Rocket League for X amount of time every day, let's say 8 hours for the sake of numbers, by themselves. So normally when you'd go to work or you'd jump on a Zoom call or you'd stand in front of students, you're having some form of interaction, right? So I think esports is relatively lonely. And I think anything that is going to impact that. One of the big things that I say is, like, if you struggle to go to the gym, if you struggle to exercise, try an exercise class. I've had so much fun doing martial art classes, and it inspires me to go more and more. And part of that is community as well. So I think that's a big part of it.
Awesome. Listen, I'm trying to catch up a little bit of time today, so I'm going to just offer the chance to anybody who wants to ask any questions to our experts on the panel here. And in the meantime, whilst they're getting their thinking caps on, could you both give me something easy and tangible that people here could take away and deliver in their classrooms? Any top tip or anything that you can provide?
So I always talk about the 20-20-20 rule. And it's a vision rule that all of us need to do. So every 20 minutes, you look 20 feet away for 20 seconds. So I tell people, mark out 20 feet. I don't know what's the metric here, but use your feet and mark out 20 steps. And I tell them usually just post something on the wall or on the floor so that you already have a visual there. Set an alarm every 20 minutes. And even in between meetings or in between classes, just look away for 20 seconds. And what that does, it actually resets the muscles of your eye. It allows them to kind of refocus. It gets more lubrication in your eye. And that's something very simple. So the 20-20-20 vision rule.
Yeah, I think for me, whatever discipline when it comes to health and wellness, well-being, fitness, whatever discipline you're going to go down, I would say look to improve by 1%. Lots of times. I think we tend to have this sort of mindset of like, oh, I'm going to go to the gym, and by the way, I'm going to start bench pressing 4 times my body weight. And whilst that is a wonderful goal to have, I don't always think it's useful for long-term sort of turning it into a habit, So I would say start simple. For example, if you're going to breathing exercises or meditation, do 2 minutes of meditation a day, 1 minute of meditation a day. Don't go for a 20-minute meditation that's going to be really intense, because it probably won't stick. So my piece of advice would be start small and slowly build.
That's very good. There you have it.
Right. Any questions from the house? Up there, I'll just run up. Come back to you afterwards.
Thank you. As educators, sometimes we might come across students who heavily follow a particular esports scene, and I'm thinking of League of Legends mainly here. If we've got students who do follow kind of maybe Eastern practices more than Western practices, how do we kind of maybe combat that kind of analytics where it's quite common there for pro athletes to sit and do 16 hours of solo queue a day and things like that? And obviously then when they go, well, they do better than us internationally and all that kind of jazz, it's hard to maybe combat that as an educator. What would you guys recommend kind of do that?
I would start by saying that it's arguably a false sort of narrative, right? The 16 hours doesn't necessarily mean better. There might be hundreds of other things that go into that. It might be that they have exquisite coaches, really good coaches who know an awful lot. For me, I would rather train smarter, not harder. Smarter, not longer, at least. Let's put it that way. For me, I would rather sit down with a player for half an hour, understand a little bit more about them, learn how they like to be coached, for example, as opposed to just being like, go and do another 3 solo queue games. It's really hard because the player has to buy into what you're selling, right? And if they don't buy in, you probably won't advance too far. But yeah, I would say it's better to practice less and focus on other things. So it could be exercise, it could be sleep, it could be diet, it could be emotional regulation, than it is to queue up for another 3 solo queue games.
I think we've got time for one more. Did you have a question?
With my students, the major issue is their eating habits. Mainly they eat rubbish. So any top tips instead of for like a superfood and a relatively inexpensive superfood for my students?
I don't know about soup food, but certainly, oh, super. I was like, I don't know about soup food. So there's certain, and I don't have them off the top of my head, but there's certain foods that I make sure that are still you can grab with your hand while you're sitting. So vitamin B, E, D, vitamin B, so vitamin B, E, D, and vitamin A, C, E, ACE. So vitamin B, E, D is really for cognitive wellness, and vitamin A, C, E, ACE is for vision health. And so if we can start to promote more foods that are going to help their vision health, their brain health, but there are things like, carrots or grapes, or having something that's a little healthier, greens, or if you're going to eat salmon, to make sure you're getting a certain vitamin, or a turkey sandwich versus something else, that are going to have these boosting vitamins for your brain and vision health. I think that's always something great. So it doesn't need to be a crisp. It can, who wants to eat a carrot? Maybe not everybody, but it can be still something different. But I always focus on those foods that are easy, they're handheld, and they have those vitamins in them.
I would say one thing that I harp on an awful lot to my players about is what I would call like the perfect plate. Now, there is a lot more nuance to this, but if you ensure that every meal you have preferably has a portion of complex carbohydrate, a protein, and a portion of fruit or veg, you're generally going to be okay. Split the plate into thirds and sort of portion thusly. Breakfast could be porridge, blueberries, peanut butter. It could be spaghetti bolognese with broccoli, something like that. If you keep to that sort of setup, generally speaking, it's a really good place to start. You can go down snacks for other things, but for meal times, that's where you'll do the most good, I think. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your questions. Alex and Melita, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.